Welcome back, second grade, to part 2 of your lesson in watercolor. So I'm going to take my camera and pan it down so you can see what I'm doing. And you can see I watched my intro and I have my tape around my border of my paper. I have my paper on my board. I have my palette ready with my colors. Today I'm going to be using some red, some blue, some yellow, and some green. I have my water container cleaned and ready, and I also have a pencil. The first thing I want you to do is you're going to turn your paper so it's horizontal, and you're going to create a line that goes across from one side to the other. Okay? Now, that line is what we call the horizon line. That's the line that divides the earth and the sky. So, in the sky, I'm going to do the wet on wet technique to create the sky and the clouds. So I'm going to take my big paintbrush and I'm going to put a line of water right where I put that horizon line to prevent the watercolor paint from going into the earth. And I'm going to loosely put the water on the top. Now, I'm going to dip into some red and into some blue, and I'm going to tap it on and let the color go wild. And I don't want to put the color everywhere because I want to create some clouds. Now, in watercolor, there is no white, so you want to make sure you leave some white to create clouds and highlights. So I'm going to take a little more blue and just feather that in. And oh my goodness, does that look pretty already? Now, I don't want to run the risk of this getting ruined, so I'm not going to pick it up yet. I'm just going to take my hairdryer and I'm going to put a little bit of air and a little bit of heat on it, so that way I can show you the next step. Now I want to show you something with the hairdryer. I'm going to put it on and I'm going to blow dry it in one direction. That way the water kind of all travels that way instead of all over my paper. I can take my paper towel and just wipe up anything that's spilling off on the edges. So you can see how that's starting to look. My sky looks good, but I think I'm going to add just a little more of the blue and a little more of the red on top. I'm using the control brush method to darken in some of the spots of it, create more depth. Just going in. Now those white spots that were there really look like clouds now. If I hold this up, I can show it to you. Isn't that beautiful? I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry with the hairdryer, and then I'll show you the next step. Alright, so boys and girls, I let that dry, and you can see that the wet on wet technique created a beautiful sky. So now I'm going to work on the bottom, and I'm going to use some blues and some greens and a medium-sized brush like this, and I'm going to create a beautiful ocean down below. So I'm loading up my brush with the blue and the green, and I'm going to start to put it across. Now the beautiful part about controlled brush is I can manipulate the paint more and I can control where it goes. I'm going to leave some white spots because if you ever looked at the ocean, the sun glistens off of it and you see little white speckles or highlights. So I'm just gonna blend that beautiful color. I might take a little red, blend it into my blue, and create some more shadow in the water. And again, this is controlled brush painting. And you can see within a minute, I now have something that looks like the ocean. Okay, I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush now. And I wanna create, on my horizon line, some mountains going across the background. Maybe this is the Hudson River, and I can see the mountains on the other side. So I'm gonna take some red, and I'm gonna take some blue, and a little bit of yellow, and mix it together to create a beautiful dark color. And I'm gonna go across, and I'm using controlled brush painting, and I'm gonna feather in some mountains in the background. And I can see some of the sky through those mountains because the paint is translucent. I can see through it. And that's one of the beautiful things about watercolor, is that you can layer the paint to create more depth. I think I'm gonna take a little more blue now and go in with controlled brush and just add some marks. And this will add some depth into those mountains behind in the background on the horizon line. And check that out. Do you see the mountains? All right, now I think I'm gonna take my big brush here and I'm gonna clean it off and dry it off. And now I wanna use some dry brushing into the ocean to create some ripples in the water. So I'm gonna take the blue and I'm gonna take the green. And I have it on my brush and I'm gonna wipe some of it off. You can see how dry that brush is. When the bristles on the brush are separated, that means that the brush is very dry and thirsty. So that's good for dry brushing. And now with a steady hand, I'm just gonna go from side to side and lightly brush on some of that color. Boys and girls, the direction in which you paint is extremely important. Because painting and drawing is two-dimensional, you have to create hand movements that make it look like a three-dimensional world. And towards the back, I'm going to turn my paintbrush to create some thinner dry brush lines to add some more interest. Dip back in. And if you notice, I like starting on the edge. Because I know when I peel that tape off, that darker color is going to hit that white line. It's going to pop it out. Go towards the bottom of it. Look at that dry brush. Look how beautiful that came out. Now, let's add some details in the painting. I'm going to take my tiny little brush here, and I'm going to put some green and a little bit of red together. Green and red are opposites, so when I mix them together, you get like a muddy color. And I'm going to make some sailboats in the water. And to make the sailboat, It's as easy as making an upside down capital T. I'm gonna put a little line across like that, and a little line going up, which will be the top of the sail. And look at that. I now have a little sailboat in the water, and I might put just a tiny little line here. Maybe that's a rope reaching up. You want to give just the idea of what's in the picture. Makes it look more artistic. And I think I'll put a tiny little boat in the background. And the further away something gets, the lighter it should be. And I think in the sky, since I love nature and animals, I'm gonna put some birds. And I'm gonna take all three primary colors, that's red, blue, and yellow, and mix them together and get a really sharp point. And in the sky, just to add some interest, I'm gonna put the tiniest letter V's all over. And maybe these are the birds that fly by the Hudson River. There. And I think I'm gonna take that color I made and go back in over the mountains a bit, just to add some shadows in there. Sometimes less is best. Sometimes you don't have to overdo it. All right. I'm gonna take my hairdryer and I'm just gonna lightly blow this dry, and then it's time to take the tape off. Alright, so boys and girls, I gave the painting some time to dry, and now it's time to remove the tape. I'm going to start with the last piece that I put down, and I'm going to pull away from the artwork. Pulling away from the artwork will make sure that you do not rip into the painting in case if the tape gets too sticky. Okay, see what I did right here? Look at that. See, the tape got stuck to the paper, but because I ripped away, it went that way and not into the beautiful painting. But look at that, boys and girls. Look what happens when you put a thicker white edge around your painting. So boys and girls, you too can create this beautiful landscape. You now know how to do wet on wet, controlled brush painting, and dry brush. Give it a try. If you master it, please send me a picture. Mom and Dad can email me at pricet@pearlriver.org. And if you'd like to click on the other grade links and give those projects a try too, I certainly encourage you to do so. Have a great week, and we'll be in touch.